You know, a lot has changed since I posted the first half of this run. Neat. Anyways, this is an Omori challenge run, and a continuation to this video, though it's not necessary to watch for this half. This entire video is post-game content, while that video was the main game. Essentially, everything from here on out is optional content. Also, obvious spoilers are obvious, I won't be going into story details, obviously, but this will spoil large chunks of the game by default, so viewers beware. Okay? Okay. So I've hyped up the post-game as the actual hard part of this run. And there's a ton of reasons for that. Mostly being that's the hard part, though I do want to briefly explain something that should help put into perspective why this half of the game is so hard. Basically being that, well, bosses are no longer super passive. Bosses are going to start using debuffs, have more dangerous gimmicks, and just in general can rip us to shreds if we aren't careful, which is something we didn't have to worry about before. As a reminder, I've done this run on the console version, and there is a very significant change that is only relevant here. But all buffs and debuffs are, in fact, permanent. Normally, they run out in about 6 turns, but they don't in the console version. Before, this made our lives easier. Now, well, it still mostly makes it easier. But we have to deal with permanent drops now, and any debuffs onto us can become scary. And permanent. Anyways, because I'm not expecting everyone to go back to watch a previous video, in summary, we beat up everything with relative ease. Thanks Zach the Jr. mostly, as he gives an obscene amount of stats for how early we can get him. Most fights we end up winning through out-tanking the opponent, using the emotion system, or just spamming sad to end up getting through. The emotion system I will throw up on screen now. We can use emotions to multiply our damage, and use it to increase some of our stats. It can stack up to 3 times on us, so we should use it to our advantage. It will come with downsides, however, that we should be prepared to deal with. Our best healing item is snow cones, which are getting affordable now. These will increase all our stats by 20% when used, while restoring us to max HP and juice. Very helpful. Finally, we do this run by removing the weapons from our allies, causing them to miss constantly when they attack. So they'll be attacking and missing the entire time, only serving as meat shields. And we won't use the follow-ups, skills, or the ultimate attack. This should be the majority of what you need to know. Also, before we get into things proper, I want to thank Unfunny Potato and Too Many Toasters for making me aware that my prediction was correct. If you recall, I said that mods could probably remove the party members entirely, and I was right. Linked below is Unfunny Potato's run of all the boss fights OMORI-only, which he did actually OMORI-only. Pretty neat. He's also done most of the post-game bosses, but spoiler, he did them very differently than we will for the most part. We also have to worry about some extra bosses they didn't, so this run is still relevant, I guess. Anyways, we golden? We ready to go? Cool, let's get started. Post-game officially begins now, and we started by getting a new ability, Red Hands. It's essentially a buffed up hack away for a lot more juice, and is insanely powerful for damage. We also get an additional +2 to all stats from a knife upgrade, and we can use something else out of Hector for a change. A Flower Crown. It's not necessarily strictly better, but the extra health is very valuable to us, for allowing us to go much further, as it increases our health by 100. We'll be using it a lot. The other items we can get from Basil's house are less valuable, but I will cover them if I use them. Moving on. Deeper Well has changed, slightly. There's now some sheet music. We can bring these back to the Lost Library, and we'll get some additional fights. Beating these fights will give us access to some new attacks, and we really want these new attacks. With Basil at the Funny People Picnic, we've got some fairly tough fights to deal with. Unfortunately, this includes these fights, go figure. These are the phobias you fight during the day, but with actual fights. And are fairly rough, each, so let's just get right into it. Fear of Falling is a damage race. If you don't win in 10 turns, you will fall on the ground and die. Instantly. This is clearly not wanted, so we will use Furious for the first time in the entire run. This will double our damage total, and is the only way we can reasonably get this fight done. Otherwise, we will not have the damage. We can't use emotions to our advantage, either. Every fear is totally immune to emotions, so we only have the raw stats emotions give us. An issue. We have to hope it wastes enough turns attacking our friends instead of us. That's all we can do, though it isn't a particularly hard task. Fear of Spiders has some really good damage, but nothing more. We can outlive this one, thankfully, and it doesn't exactly do much else. It's definitely the outlier due to no major gimmick, though I suppose its gimmick is huge group DPS. I suppose. But Fear of Drowning? This is a much, much scarier fight. Because we can't outlive it. That's impossible. Its attacks deal obscene amount of damage. It attacks 2 times in a turn, with an additional, hard, defined set of damage done at the end of each turn, which will increase. This is a harder Humphrey, and it's one hell of a harder Humphrey. Sadness will not help us out here. Defense means nothing. Every attack goes through it, and deals damage based on max HP or set. And we need to be dealing damage quickly for the last stage, which can whip us down exceedingly fast due to dealing a guaranteed 150 damage minimum each turn. You are going to need to nuke it down. Fast. And by fast, I really mean spending ages in the first form setting yourself up. The first phase's end of turn damage is only 50 after all, and it's the safest place to hang about. Furious has no downside here. Go for it. This will increase the damage of Red Hand by a massive amount. You will need more than just that, though. You have very few turns to kill this thing in the last stages, so you need to be reducing defense, and finally, you need to use a snow cone. This will increase your attack again, hopefully, for the final time. At this point, you should be able to do over 2000 damage in a single usage of Red Hands. You just need to hope you can pull it all off with good luck, and let it be over. Anyways, now that these fights are over, we've unlocked 3 very powerful moves. Vertigo, a move that uses our speed as damage, and severely decreases attack on all enemies. Suffocate, an attack that does 400 damage every single time, and will severely decrease defense on all enemies. And Cripple, a move that does strong damage to all enemies and decreases speed significantly. In other words, we have an improved Mock, Trick, and Shun, no longer needing any terms of setup, and being totally AoE. I'll be using these in the rest of fights we have to do. Though, we should step back and look at all the bosses we need to do. Well, Kite Kid needs to be whooped again for starters. We also have a rematch with Pluto we can do, and we can explore Snow Globe Mountain proper. We need to fight Bossman Hero, too, which is a console exclusive fight. We also have the Abyss to explore, which we need to collect keys to do. In addition, there's a super boss in Humphrey we need to do, and a boss rush there as well. A mighty amount of work, so let's just get through it, eh? Let's start with Kite Kid, the clearly easy and free fight, right? Yeah, the reason I reset Kite Kid wasn't to beat him up harder later. Long story short, he's a separate fight you can do later if you don't beat him up, which is this one. He gets buff stats and a new gimmick, which will radically shift the Kite's and the Kid's stats around, most notably very significantly increasing attack. Thankfully, when the wind is weak, his stats are reset, and we can get back to damage. I end up going for Depressed instead of Miserable here. At this point, Red Hands is by far our best damage dealer, so we should be abusing it as much as possible. Miserable means that every attack done to us will drain all our juice, then all our health, which makes things a little bit harder when trying to pull off Red Hands. And I believe that due to all our healing restoring both health and juice, this overall gives a bigger health pool anyways. Still, this fight is pretty simple, and we can beat it without much hassle. Oh, and we are missing a fight. There's another fight like this in the Unbred Twins, where it gains some more HP and the summoning mechanics change. Unfortunately, I mucked up my saves and couldn't go back, so yeah, rip that fight. Heading off into Snow Forest, we can enter Snow Globe Mountain now, to defeat Space Ex-Husband, and fight some other stuff. Space Ex-Husband himself is an interesting fight, but to our run we only really need to bring some extra sparkles and presents, and we are mostly set to deal with it, as this fight allows us to slow down and fight at our own pace. It's convenient for us, at any rate. Regardless, we get lost for a bit, clear up Dino's Dig while gaining an obscene amount of levels for it, and we head to Last Resort, where Hero becomes a boss fight. Unfortunately, they aren't exactly a pushover, and have probably the most diverse moveset in the game so far, and it's not even close. Bossman Hero is a really rough fight because at any given time he can do any given thing. It's madness. You've got your tanking in order? Too bad. Gator Guy here is willing to waste all his clams to debuff your stats, so your defense means nothing. Then kill you instantly because he can't deal with him anymore. Or he'll muck with your emotions, so he gets stuck in anger. Rip his life savings. Bossman Hero will offer a contract every turn, and you should accept or decline these as necessary. Though any contract you pass up, the Gator Guys have a chance to take. These contracts have a huge variety of effects, though most annoyingly, these can include healing, which can be scary. To make matters worse, Hero will not be affected by any emotions. However, his Gator Guys absolutely will. Use this to your advantage, however, and unlike any other fight like this in the rest of the game, kill the Gator Guys first. Your damage will be multiplied due to emotional advantage. If you set it up right, and if you can remove both, all contracts will be signed on your terms. Once this is done, the fight is much easier. Just make sure you don't make a deal to take damage when you can't take it, but also feel free to take a few deals that give you ludicrous amounts of clams. Shockingly enough to me, he will actually pay up, which allows us to get practically infinite snow cones. Seriously, it will give you 100,000 clams for each deal, as snow cones only cost 5,000. That's 20 snow cones per deal, and you can easily take a few. Madness. We'll be using these as our main healing for the rest of the game. After clearing up Pluto's rematch, who did 7 damage on their great ultimate attack, while we did over 3,000, it wasn't difficult. Anyways, we can finish collecting our keys and head down to the Abyss to finish off the enemies we need to beat, and also encounter Abby. Abby is an interesting fight for similar reasons to the Fear fights, but with a new twist. Remember how Bossman Hero has that one trait where he can, sometimes, rarely, debuff us? Well, Abby noticed how this was a serious concern for us. It then decided to spawn 4 enemies, each of which has the ability to debuff all our stats. Not only that, Abby also has the ability to buff their own stats, and uses the angry condition, screwing over our sadness strats even more than usual. We have to approach this round differently, but thankfully, we have a few tricks up our sleeves. Most notably in our infinite supply of snow cones, but also in Final Strike, a move we haven't seen yet. It's essentially the auto attack, which deals additional damage when emotions are at an extreme. This is very important, as it makes our attacks hit everyone, and we can clear the tentacles while killing Abby herself. In addition, this doesn't cost much juice at all, and we can spam the move fairly safely while manic, and the entire enemy group will become angry often throughout the fight. I ended up using about 4 to 5 snow cones this fight to recover HP and juice. This ended up working quite nicely, though I also used both Vertigo and Suffocate to lower their respective stats early on. Still, this fight could easily muck you apart. You need to approach this fight with the right mindset, otherwise you simply lose. We don't need much luck to get out of it alive. Thankfully, after this fight we get a ton of new equipment, 4 of which we can use, an additional +2 to all stats thanks to a new knife. One item I am thinking about using extensively is a cough mask. The game came out just before these became more common, they are not here because they're funny. Anyways, this mask will give us some great stat buffs to every stat we got, and will also increase its juice and health by 25. We lose 75 HP for 10 more of every other stat when compared to Flower Crown, and I think this is better for us overall. Anyways, if we head down to Humphrey, we can get a boss rush done. How fun. We'll need to do this twice, for reasons you'll see later, but this features every fight we've done thus far with buff stats, which is neat. This doesn't change in most fights significantly, but I'll bring up any fights that change significantly. But before we get into that proper, we have some interesting fights to get the hang of first. Mutated Heart is an interesting fight that requires us to be a certain emotion, or we get one-shot. This sounds scary at first, as Mutated Heart herself will muck with our emotions, but you can just make her the emotion you want to be, as we will always have speed, and wait for them to double up on any emotion before attacking. Not that hard. Rubber Heart is a free fight that does nothing, but I felt the need to bring up anyways. Now, let's cover the boss rush fights. I'll only be covering fights that change significantly, as most don't really change much. Sir Maximus is now a 3-man fight, and has the potential to be quite scary, especially when they start spinning, but you can out-heal it, Just be careful and remove Sir Maximus III first. Jolsum is much more dangerous here, as his goons are much harder to tank this time around, and in general have a lot more HP than I'd like. I actually lost him on my first go through, which is interesting to note. Make sure you don't ever attack a goon individually, and try to keep them equal, so you can kill both at the same time, as otherwise, this fight will not end. Ever. Basically, don't play dumb, always play to kill, use some milk, and hey presto, this fight is doable. The slime girls have went from yeah this could be a threat, to oh hell, with the stat buffs. Mostly because of that damn chainsaw. Seriously, that chainsaw is single-handedly the most threatening thing in the whole game to us so far, as it just chews through our HP with absurd speed, and then ignores our defense to make it worse, as it deals a random amount of damage each time. It's horrific. And it sucks because we can't swap our items mid-fight. This fight single-handedly forces us to use a flower crown again, because, as it turns out, 100 extra heart is obscenely effective. Unfortunately, this also makes literally every other fight much harder, which is very unfortunate, but we kinda just have to deal with it, I guess. Humphrey's first stage is a lot scarier than before, but beyond that, it's simply cleanup. Survive the onslaught, and you just have to outlive Humphrey. A shockingly easy endeavor. Remember to save before you enter a boss rush, too. This way, you can load a save before you lose instead of continuing. We use an absurd amount of items in this run, and if we run out of snow cones, we won't be able to do some other stuff after, so it's vital to not waste items on failed runs. With this in mind, it's definitely doable, and we can get a fancy trophy for beating the boss rush. Anyways, there's an extra fight here if we go for the entire thing for Basil. The issue, however, is that actually getting Basil there, utterly impossible. We can't unequip his shears, and he doesn't even have a guard option like anybody else does, which means that he will always be doing something significant. It's very unfortunate, honestly, as the fight at the end here is one of the fights I was particularly excited to try in his run. Ah well. Unless... Let's move on for now, as we only have one more thing we can do as far as I'm aware. Perfect Heart. Perfect Heart is the super boss. You know, the classic trope of RPGs where there's this one super difficult and tough fight you have to grind years to beat. Yeah, that's Perfect Heart. Now the max level is 50, but we need a game plan to make up for that. In addition to everything else, as we are at a severe disadvantage for obvious reasons. The plan? Well, we don't have one. For one reason. Yeah, Perfect Heart just so happens to have a screen clearing move that does damage based on our max health. They also just so happen to be like download window. As in, at a certain point, they will only use that move. And this move, it does 75% of our HP. Every single time. Not only that, but also randomly choose an emotion to be. So we have to spend every single turn this phase healing, while the enemy will constantly outdamage us. In addition, they are healed to full HP, and there is no way to my knowledge to buff attack with items beyond the snow cone, which will only buff our stats a grand total of once. As a result, I think it's safe to say this fight isn't possible. It would be possible for Mori doing all damage, however, which is something I guess, but that's hardly a surprise, and would feature us more or less spamming 10,000 beaters every single turn. Not very interesting. It's not like we can pray for a good RNG and that she misses even, as she literally can't miss. Ever. But hey, we can't say we didn't give it a good faith shot. Ironically enough, we can quite consistently get to the second phase, and it's only the second phase which we can't do. We can do more or less anything else in this game, and I think that's worth celebrating in its own right. Besides, we already beat the game. This boss fight is totally optional, and the game will literally give you the achievement for completing the full facts book by just entering a fight. So honestly, I can't complain. The original goal was to complete the book after all, and we did indeed do just that. However, I will say that theoretically the fight may barely be possible. By theoretically, I mean they quite literally have to spam Sanders' emotions several times in a row to get miserable up, and then chip away incredibly slowly with perfect RNG, and hope you have enough snow cones. I don't have the patience to try this in game, but this is the only way I can see this fight being done. So if you're bored, give it a shot, I guess. And that's it. I mean, we beat the game ages ago really, but this is as far as we can go. It's honestly surprising the very hardest fight in the game was the only one else for even possible, but let's be real, doing 75% of your max HP and damage each turn is super cheaty. So yeah, that's it. Nah, I can't just leave it on that, can I? Okay, so remember the boss rush, and how we can't make Basil do nothing. Well, that's somewhat of a lie. There is one very specific way to make them do nothing. Dandelions. Dandelions can allow to do nothing in one very specific circumstance. You target an enemy or ally that is already neutral. But you also have to be set every single time you muck up and press attack on Basil. It's awful. Anyways, I gave a contract to Basil so he'd die quicker. We can only carry 99 dandelions, so I really want to make sure he doesn't actually use them too much. In addition, if we ever actually move condition, we have to reset the entire rush. Just be careful. For the most part, this is actually just about as difficult as being these fights usually. You just need to make sure Basil dies before anything goes wrong really. Turns out meat shields don't mean a whole lot for a majority of these fights. Anyways, at the very end, we get into the final fight for this challenge, the friend fight. We've had Red Leaf for such an interesting and very... You're actually kidding me. These monsters have decided to, instead of directly attacking us, to literally attack our only method of being able to do nothing. We can't do this fight at all. Basil has to do something, and we literally can't make him not do something. And then Kill gets the final blow by dealing more damage than we can ever hope to deal. It's an embarrassment. They not only wrecked us, but they wrecked us so badly that we literally can't fight them in this rule set, then proceeded to wreck us outside of it by threatening to make the entire run invalid. I don't have any words to describe how ludicrous this is. I have never been wrecked so hard by a fight in my life, and I don't think I ever will. Seriously, they've done nothing for us the entire run, and now claims them at their weakest. For themselves, for a lot of them. Some friends. Just kidding. We have a way out. It just makes my life even more annoying. In the Abyss, we can get a really cool item called a paper bag. It's a really solid defensive item, with one very unique trait. You can't be affected by emotions anymore. You can see where I'm going with this. Probably. In addition, we can refight the friends fight without replaying the entire boss rush. My only concern is that this means I've done the whole boss rush OMORI-only like 3 different times. At both of successful attempts, there's much more which fails spectacularly. I now have PTSD of the chainsaw sound effects. This is very fun. Anyways, with a paper bag, you can actually legally lose by ensuring there is always a target who is neutral so Basil can do nothing. We may get beat down here, but now we have access to a replayable version of a fight. This gives us so much power. We can now actually play the game. We don't need to recover from the last fight. We can specifically plan for this fight. It's just incredibly good and important for us. We now have control. We can now actually plan and change equipment. Now we move on to the ability Onslaught that is the friend's fight itself. You see, each friend has like 1,000 different abilities. Not only that, but they all have access to follow-up attacks, which just add more actions and mean they can often make a solid 4 to 5 attacks in a turn, while we do 1. To make matters worse, these guys even have access to healing. Healing! On top of a ton of ways to lower our attack and defense. You know, the important ones. Furthermore, they can utterly muck with our emotions hard. Kel has Curveball and Hero has Spicy Food, both attacks capable of changing our emotions whenever they want, which will screw us over at some point. The most terrifying move, though, is Power Focus from Aubrey, which will decrease our defense while ignoring it and will always target a character the most. A scary prospect for sure when you remember we will often be attacked, at minimum, 3 different times a turn. We cannot afford a defense drop. I spent a long time looking around with equipment to figure out how this fight works and how we can possibly do it. I tried items. I tried seeing if we can get Basil to be family sad. I tried using the paper bag. Even experimented with trying to use Sanders to our advantage. It was no use. So, I needed to find a new plan. We get debuffed to the Abyss, and there's nothing we can do about it. Or is there? Maybe. This fight took me 6 hours in raw gameplay and multiple days of thought and planning. This is the only fight in this game that took me over an hour, and there's a very simple explanation as to why. Its solution isn't obvious. It's a solution that barely makes sense. It's a totally luck-based RNG strategy that seems so utterly dumb and stupid that it shouldn't work, yet does. Barely. And I figured it out thanks to this fight seemingly throwing the solution into my face. Literally. In this fight, every single turn 3 and 4, and only turns 3 and 4, thankfully, the friends will set up for an attack that has been dubbed the Kel nuke. Essentially, uber buffing the damage of a run and gun to absurd levels, by increasing speed. This is a fan-made strategy, but I've never actually done it, so let's go into why it works. Happy increases speed by 1.25 times, while Flexi increases damage by 2.5 times, but this doesn't explain the majority of a nuke, now does it? Well, the answer is coffee and how speed is buffed. You see, all buffs have 3 tiers, and some items will go straight to 3rd tier, same way how debuffing a stat works. Coffee, however, is special, because the 3rd tier buff for speed, it's a smidge stronger than the others. Just a smidge. And coffee boosts directly to that tier, which is why the damage is increased so significantly. But I feel the need to note that this got nerfed in the console releases, which is fires in, so there's only 200% extra speed for us here. Still, this is impressive. And remember, as I said before, this buff will never drop, which offers us a pretty valuable idea. Vertigo. Vertigo is a move we used for debuffing in the past, but here, it allows us to ignore Hero essentially entirely. They only debuff our attack, while Vertigo uses our speed. And sure enough, use Coffee and Vertigo, and you start to see some really good damage. Flat out damaging Red Hands while we have no emotion and are neutral. And not by a negligible amount either. It's even fully AoE, so we can damage everyone at a time, which is very helpful. This should leave our strategy clear. We need to kill everyone before they can kill us. Equip a paper bag on us. This will block Hero from doing anything to us ever, and will stop Curveball from being a problem. It also offers some really solid defense, and a little bit of extra HP, just in case. I equipped Bazil with the top hat, too, as this is a defensive item that will draw one power focus away from us. In addition to just slowing these guys down slightly, as I used some of their attacks in the early game on Bazil. The winning attempt was hardly clean. I took Kel down, but then Aubrey decided to spam power focus a lot. However, I did eventually get to a position where, with enough luck, I was able to barely win. I almost died at Hero, but he luckily wasted his turn, just in time for us to finish off. It only took me 40 minutes after figuring out the strategy to win. Yet, ironically enough, I wouldn't have figured out that Coffee Vertigo was the solution if the game didn't show the absurd power speed here. Thanks, Kel, you literally showed me how to win. Now that our friends have thoroughly been humbled, we can move on with a boss rush. I feel very intimidated. Anyways, after OMORI-onlys, we have completed the entire event, and with it, every single fight we can do. It's unfortunate that we can't do Perfect Heart, but honestly, we don't need to go for perfection here. We've proved ourselves far enough, and it's an obviously impossible fight. However, even in that fight, up to the impossible part, it's honestly entirely fine, and so we've tried our best. Although, it is proven possible Perfect Heart is possible. In the PC version. You know how Coffee was nerfed for the console releases? Yeah, it used to be so broken that you could 2-shot Perfect Heart with Vertigo. That is incredibly funny, and even if we can't do it in particular, knowing that in another reality we could do it is rewarding in its own right. Seriously, though, we've come across so many fights in this game, and I'm honestly surprised at how far we've come. Though I'm also surprised at how easy most of the run truly was, frankly. I guess it goes to show how powerful Omori as a character truly is, that the hardest parts of this run became as hard as they were because we couldn't use moves all the time and needed to heal. At least, that's my personal thoughts. Regardless, we've more or less demonstrated that the power of friendship is entirely mute. In fact, our allies only made things worse for us in the long run, creating the hardest fight in a run. Sure, there is Perfect Heart, but we only lost our fight because our friends twirled our thumbs instead of healing us at all. Their only job is to keep us alive, which they've done nothing towards. Meanwhile, we were left to do all the hard lifting. Whatever. At this point, we're essentially God, so let's just leave it at that. We can head up to white space, do the stabby stab for the last time, and finish the game. What a run. That's about all I can really say. This was a fun run to go through, and it's definitely weird to go back to this run, but I seriously enjoyed doing this. It's a nice break, and I'm glad to have this chapter fully closed, as it should have been a while ago. Will I return to do more challenge runs of this game? Probably not, but I could, I guess. I don't know, I feel there are cooler things I could move on to, but it was certainly a nice change of pace, and it would be totally up to do some random challenge runs on games like this in this kind of style, because I just sorta like that. Anyways, subscribe and stuff, you know what the classic YouTube trio is. Let me know how this video is compared to my usual stuff. This has been Creeps, and have a good one.